Tuning in here on 13 WMAZ Plus for a look at your extended forecast. So we have one blemish in our 7-day forecast, and it's really just today in terms of a gloomy atmosphere, which you've more than likely already walked out the door and gotten a glimpse of. Plenty of overcast and gray skies. We do have a few rain chances today, but then your forecast is shaping up a whole lot nicer for the end of the work week. Sorry, just adjusting my earpiece right here. Was definitely blowing my own ears out right there with how loud the volume was. But drying out after today is your main headline, and then we're going to welcome in some below average highs, and along with that, some below average morning low temperatures. Rain chances will return for the very end of the weekend, but we still have a ways to go before we really fine-tune that forecast. I think the bigger headline is going to be the first, the second, and right now what looks to be the third day of the Georgia National Fair are shaping up a little bit cooler and with plenty of sunshine in the forecast. So across the quad, all across central Georgia, obviously we have our fair view right here where all the vendors, those food stands, carnival games, and all of the rides continue to get set up. I guess it would be more beneficial if I moved out of the screen so you could get a good glimpse of what's going on there. You do see the camera shaking just a tad, and that's in light of the breezy conditions we continue to have in our forecast. We take it to downtown Dublin, plenty of cloudy skies over Warner Robins and Macon on the left side of your screen. So that's been the story so far today. I don't think I've seen the sun so far. Even as we got into sunrise time, we just saw those clouds get a bit brighter in nature as you were walking out the door. And we continue to pan a couple of these cameras over to the east where still no sunlight can be found, but that's not the case for all of today. So we transition into the late afternoon to evening time frame. I think that's finally when we'll start to get some peaks of sunshine. Hopefully you can get a good image of the sunset later on. So temperature-wise, some areas still in the upper 60s. Yes, Thomaston and Forsyth sitting at 68 and 69 degrees. The rest of central Georgia just into the low 70s. So we still don't have much of a temperature spread so far today. We have some areas as high as 73 degrees, at the lowest 68 degrees in Thomaston. So we're continuing to very slowly warm up, maybe about a degree or two each and every hour. Taking a look at how this compares to the eastern United States, areas farther up to the north and the northeast. 69 in Charlotte, 75 over in Charleston, 77 in Jacksonville, 79 in Orlando, 85 degrees down in New Orleans. That's still the warmest number that we do see. Areas farther over to the west, even though they got a bit of a later start to the day than we did, we continue to see that those conditions aren't quite as dreary and maybe as gloomy as our conditions are here in the southeast United States. And it's all because of this center of circulation down just to the east of Florida. This is now Hurricane Imelda, and then we also see Hurricane Umberto, which is just to the northeast of Imelda. But both of those centers of circulation pretty close together, and it's honestly a really cool scene to see here on your current temperature graphic, because not only do you get well-defined centers of circulation with a lot of these tropical systems, but also two of them so close together. Luckily, both of these systems are going to continue to follow in the path of where Umberto is relative to Imelda, and that's going to continue up to the north and the northeast. But obviously, your fair share of breezy conditions along the eastern coast of the United States. And along with that, we're definitely looking at some increased rip currents and maybe even some portions of some coastal flooding, but I don't really think that's going to be much of a factor whatsoever. Dew point temperatures holding on to a tad bit of humidity. We have some patchy areas of dark green, which are indicating those dew point temperatures above the 70-degree mark, but a lot more of the muggier air is present farther over to the east and the southeast, closer to the Georgia coast, closer to the South Carolina coast, and it goes as far up as into portions of North Carolina, and I imagine down in Florida, just because they typically are so humid in nature. So we can see those dark green patches extending up the eastern coast of the United States. Take a look at how prominent that breeze is right off the Atlantic coast. If you know anyone that's going out maybe deep sea fishing off the Atlantic coast, then yes, it is going to be messy, messy, messy. I imagine many of the wave heights not going to be making it a suitable atmosphere and suitable waters for taking the boat well off the Atlantic coast. Down into Florida, it is really humid, and back over to the west, actually not as humid as the state of Georgia for a change. Areas around the Mississippi River have been very humid as of the last couple of weeks, so I'm sure they're really appreciating that downtick in the mugginess in the atmosphere. Here's a look at your feels like temperatures, pretty much right on par with what you did read with your current temperatures. Still feeling like somewhere in the low 70s, maybe the upper 60s. So overall, that has not really been a factor and won't continue to be a factor throughout today. Maybe once we get into the 80s as we kind of round out those late afternoon hours. We'll talk more about that when we get to the heat indices graphic. The winds and your wind gusts continuing to flow in from the north and the northeast. Right now sustained anywhere from about 5 to 10 miles per hour, and occasional gusts up to 13 miles per hour in Baldwin County. But we do see that widespread yellow color, which is going to be a step above what that blue shade is. So when you get yellows in the forecast on this graphic specifically, it does start to indicate some 15 to maybe even 20 mile per hour gusts that we will have present throughout this afternoon. So hour by hour, your temperature is still not going to waver much. I think it's going to be right here around the 1 and 2 o'clock hour that we finally start to see this cloud cover break apart, and it will result in a very quick warm up, maybe into the upper 70s. I think it's going to be just slightly around that 80-degree mark, maybe slightly above the 80-degree mark, and then transitioning into the end of the day, it looks like your temperatures are going to continue to decline as we go in between 5 and 6 o'clock and then closer to sunset, which is just past 7:30, I do believe, actually just before 7:30 now. Taking a look at yesterday's almanac, 7:21 was that sunset yesterday, 7:28 was the sunrise, and then 80 degrees for a high temperature yesterday. So that was the first day that we've had in a good stretch of days that was finally below average, and it was really just thanks to the cloud cover that we had. Some areas lucked out, got a little bit of rain, but overall the mostly cloudy atmosphere helped keep temperatures at bay, but it also helped keep your morning low temperatures a tad bit warmer. You see 68 for a morning low. That's typically what happens when you do have some cloud cover present from sunup all the way into sunset. Now we did have some occasional breaks in that cloud cover, but overall the cloud cover starts to trap any of that surface heat that you receive throughout the day. So it really just inhibits that radiation from going back out up into the atmosphere like we would see on a crystal clear night. So it kind of acts as a bit of a greenhouse effect, if you will. So just really acting as a cap. That radiation can't go higher up into the atmosphere. It gets reflected off the bottom of those clouds and goes back down to the surface. So that's why you have some warmer morning low temperatures when you have a cloudy atmosphere. But in the afternoon hours, you have the exact opposite effect because you're not getting that sunlight that breaks through the cloud cover. So your temperatures aren't going to quite be as high. All that radiation from the sun is reflecting off the top of the clouds that is higher up in the atmosphere, and it's not breaking through down to the surface. So 97 for a record high temperature yesterday back in 2019. We have seen 2019 quite frequently on this graphic. Your record morning low back in 1967 of 41 degrees. That is getting way too chilly for this time in the calendar year. Yesterday was September 29th. You don't want to start welcoming in the 40s until you maybe get into December. At the earliest, possibly November, definitely not into late September whatsoever. And in fact, we actually did record a 1/100th of an inch of rain at Middle Georgia Regional Airport. So I guess I clicked the wrong graphic on here. Obviously, we're not talking about any of these last 100-degree days whatsoever. If you were curious about how long it's been since that, it was getting back into July earlier this year. But I did want to talk about those sunrise and sunset times because this past Friday, that was the graphic I was about to show right there, did mark the first day that the nights were actually longer than hours of daylight. So now we continue to have below 12 hours of daylight. And as we transition into the future, October 15th, just a random date right there, it's just kind of a midway point in the month of October, 7:38 a.m. for a sunrise, 7:01 for a sunset. Now I put that date on there because 7:01 p.m., that's going to be your last 7 p.m. sunset after we get into October 16th and beyond until we transition back into those spring months, maybe more so late spring into early summer. That's where we're going to have sunsets before the 7 p.m. hour, indicating that we'll have just under 11 and a half hours of daylight. So as we go across the next 16 days, we're going to lose about another 30-ish minutes, maybe 35 minutes of daylight, and we'll continue to see that time frame get shorter and shorter. November 2nd is an important date, not just because it's 2 days after Halloween. That is going to mark the time change. So that's going to be daylight saving time ending, and that's going to be when we fall back. So you are going to gain an extra hour of sleep, but a lot of you are not going to be happy with this time change because 6:53 a.m. is going to be your sunrise. Okay, that's typical. That's pretty close to 7 a.m. Nothing out of the normal on that end, but it's the sunset that's important to note. 5:42 p.m., so going to be before 6 p.m. Many of you are already going to be driving home when it's dark outside, and we'll have under 11 hours of daylight for that first day of daylight, or having no daylight saving time, rather, I should say. And then the shortest day of the calendar year in terms of hours of daylight is December 21st. Sunrise is going back to around 7:33 in the morning, but then that sunset going to be just past 5:30 in the afternoon for under 10 hours of daylight by just a minute. So basically around 10 hours of daylight for the shortest day of the year, which will also fall on the winter solstice, the first day of the winter season, about 4 days before Christmas. So for today, 81 for a high temperature. Obviously that meteogram did not go up to the 81 degree mark. It only popped up to a 78. I still think we'll get some earlier clearing in cloud cover, maybe than that graphic's getting a hint of as of right now. So the earlier the cloud cover gets out of the picture, the more breaks of sunlight that we get. It would allow for a bit more of a warm up as opposed to just having the cloudy skies present all afternoon long. We do have some spotty rain chances once again in the forecast for today, just still coming in the form of isolated light showers, maybe a pocket of some steadier rain, but overcast and gloomy for most of today until we really creep closer and closer to sunset. Then we'll start to finally get some peaks of sunshine. So this is your partly cloudy icon right here, but I put it over on the right side because that sunshine going to be present in the second half of the day. So think of the left side of the icon as the beginning of the day. Think of the right side of the icon as the end of the day. We'll have some more sunshine present as we head towards the end of today. A breeze out of the northeast. Sustained winds from about 5 to 15 miles per hour with the occasional gusts creeping up towards 20 miles per hour, maybe slightly above the 20 mile per hour threshold, but it's still going to be a breezy day, a lot like yesterday was, and we're actually not getting rid of these breezy conditions for quite some time. So let's talk about how maybe the humidity could influence things. We actually see the heat indices popping up to possibly 82 degrees during that 3 to 4 o'clock hours, so where we're typically running into that afternoon high temperature. We could see those values a little bit higher if we actually are to hit that 81 degree mark. We still have some decent humidity in the forecast, but we probably are not going to talk about this graphic for Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday because we will get a downtick in the moisture levels. So as we transition into the evening hours, do you have any outdoor dinner plans with friends and family tonight? 70s and then eventually mid to low 70s as you transition into the nighttime hours. Probably going to head out to dinner around 6, 7 o'clock, I would imagine. And then as we transition into 8, 9, maybe even 10 o'clock if you're having a really late dinner. I know playoff baseball starts today, so maybe wanting to go out with your dad, go out with some friends and watch some of those games while they are kicking off today. That's about the temperatures you can expect. It's still going to have a pleasant feel all evening long. Satellite and radar picture. We finally see this getting on board with showing you how widespread the cloud coverage is. Now, yes, we do see some occasional gaps in it, but that also just may be such thin cloud cover that we do see that the sun is really just breaking through. The satellite and radar isn't initializing it. But we've had the cloudy skies present all morning long thus far, and it's just taken a while to really get a good image of that as we've been awaiting sunrise. So this satellite imagery, yes, we have to wait until it's light outside for it really to give us a good depiction of where the cloud cover is. It obviously can't see much when it's dark outside. So we did have a couple of isolated sprinkles over to the east of us. You can see one that moved just through Waynesboro earlier, but that has since fizzled out. We'll continue to see predominantly that direction of any spotty showers throughout today. They will kind of come in from the east and the northeast and start to move farther and farther over towards the west into central Georgia. So all of this cloud cover, you can see it is very widespread across the state of Georgia. Plenty of rain over here enveloped within the cloud cover back into South Carolina, up into North Carolina, Virginia, and off the Atlantic coast. And this is all associated with tropical moisture with now Hurricane Imelda, excuse me. I've been so used to saying Tropical Storm Imelda as of recently. But just take a look at this. We were talking about it a little bit yesterday. The center of circulation with Imelda is right now to the east of Florida. So it's just creeped up from the northern Bahamas right now. Hasn't really moved too much. but now it's not moving over those land masses, so it has resulted in a bit of strengthening associated with Imelda because we have some warm sea surface temperatures in this portion of the Atlantic Ocean. And obviously, anytime a tropical system moves over any form of a landmass, it doesn't really result in the most conducive environment for development. But we continue to see cloud cover and tropical rain sent nearly 700 miles away from the center of circulation associated with this storm. And it's still a busy picture over to the east and northeast of Hurricane Imelda because we do have Hurricane Umberto, I'm struggling with these pronunciations. They are definitely some names that you don't say very frequently, but right now the center of circulation actually looks to be somewhere to the west of Bermuda. So going to continue to move west of Bermuda, but eventually it will start to curve on the northern side of the island. I don't expect Umberto to really have too many impacts over in Bermuda. We're actually looking at Imelda to take a beeline path over towards Bermuda, which we'll break down with your tropics update coming up in just a little bit. So throughout the rest of today, this is a couple hours into the future, around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we start to see the widespread cloud cover beginning to break apart, but we're still holding on to a couple of those light green dots. Just a few isolated and spotty light showers in nature, maybe a pocket of steadier rain. You can try to see maybe some pockets of some yellow, maybe some orange trying to pop up within the core of some of that darker green that you do see. And I went ahead and elected to add a legend to this future view graphic, so you know what I'm talking about whenever I do refer to those yellows, those oranges, those reds, because that's going to be your heavier rates of rainfall, and that's associated with some of your stronger weather to even severe weather, but we don't have to talk about any of that as we go throughout today. Taking it all the way to 5 p.m., it does look like we have some decent clearing in that cloud cover. We start to get the rain chances out of the picture as we go into the night time frame. And then as we go overnight into Wednesday morning, still hanging on to the cloud cover, but not necessarily hanging on to the rain chances. We were talking about this graphic yesterday, and I was telling you if I continue to see good model agreement, then of course I will walk back the rain chances. I had a 10% chance of rain, even though Future View didn't show anything in the way of rain for Wednesday afternoon. Well, it continues to, and this has not just been the last 2 model runs. It's been the model run since we were talking about it at this time yesterday, even well before that. So I've gone ahead and elected to not go with the rain chance on Wednesday. We'll have more sunshine, not cloud cover, more sunshine present throughout the afternoon on Wednesday as opposed to what we saw today. It will result in some slightly warmer high temperatures in the afternoon hours, but also we'll get more clearing in that cloud cover throughout the morning hours, which will result in some slightly cooler morning lows. But as we transition into Thursday, how about a crystal clear start to the morning? And with some of the temperatures that we have forecast and along with a steady breeze that you can still see on these wind arrows, it's going to be a bit of a chilly and a bit of a crisp start to your Thursday morning, but kind of that first full day that we're actually getting a good taste of fall. Now, yes, we've seen some temperatures in the 50s as of recent weeks, although it has really been short-lived for just a couple of days possibly, and it hasn't necessarily been paired up with a breeze, and it's actually been before the fall season started. So now this is going to be some appropriately timed fall feel weather that we do have for the morning hours on Thursday. And then with the latest model run, we have seen some cloud cover trying to move into central Georgia throughout the afternoon and evening hours, maybe even seeing the very minuscule sprinkle chance as we transition into those nighttime hours, because we can see the breeze bringing in a couple scattered showers, maybe even an isolated thunderstorm or two to areas of the Georgia coast. Will any of those make it into central Georgia? Well, if they do, I would imagine it's going to be our southeasternmost counties, those counties like Telfair, Wheeler, Montgomery, Trutland, that are closest to the Atlantic coast of Georgia. So talking about our wind gusts, I did mention that there's still going to be a factor throughout not only today, but for the next couple of days. Let's go ahead and flash forward into your Tuesday afternoon, still seeing the occasional breeze that could be slightly above 20 miles per hour. I still think that's mainly going to be farther down to the south and the southeast, because those areas are closer to the center of Hurricane Imelda, but we also continue to see those gusty winds well back up to the northeast, even patches of red and pink colors, which are going to indicate gustier winds than what you see in those yellow shaded areas. We see the breeze try to subside as we go overnight, but still in the forecast for your Wednesday afternoon. Not quite as gusty as what we do see today, but as we transition into Thursday, how How about this? This is actually forecasted to maybe be the windiest day that we do have in our short-term forecast. Widespread gusts up to 20 or even 25 miles per hour. And as we transition into the very end of this graphic, which is Friday at 8 a.m., it doesn't look like we see any signs of this breeze going anywhere. It's going to be another windy start to your Friday morning, which could result in possibly a bit of a wind chill factor. If it's not actually official on some of the numbers, it definitely is going to make it feel just a tad bit cooler. So you may want to break the windbreaker out with some of the morning low temperatures that we have for Thursday and Friday mornings. But first things first, let's talk about your forecast for Tuesday and Wednesday. I did mention the slight uptick in the high temperature between Tuesday and Wednesday, and that's because we'll have more sunshine present for the first part of the day on Wednesday. It will result in a slight warm up, but your morning low temperatures, not as much cloud cover trapping any of that surface radiation. So that's why we will see the numbers slightly cooler as opposed to maybe slightly warmer, which you would see that reflection between afternoon to afternoon as opposed to morning to morning. 20% chance of a light and brief shower throughout the rest of this afternoon. Then we take the rain chances away on Wednesday. Now let's go into Thursday. 59 degrees for a morning low temperature, pairing it up with a steady breeze where you could have some occasional gusts up to 15 miles per hour, maybe even 20 miles per hour. But then we also have a high temperature below 80 degrees, 78 for a high temperature. And this isn't a 78 that is going to be caused by widespread cloud cover, rain-cooled air like we've been so used to. This is going to be a sunny in 78. So the setup that Imelda is going to leave with us over the next couple of days will usher in some cooler and drier air. Now, it's going to take a little bit for the cooler air to make its presence known. I think that's more so going to be on Thursday. However, the drier air is going to start influencing our forecast a little bit earlier on Wednesday. So let's talk about your afternoon highs past those next 3 days. 79 on Friday and 81 on Saturday. Yes, I know that number has an 8 in front of it, but all of these days are virtually feeling the same, and it's almost the entirely same forecast, which you'll see for Friday and Saturday on the long range models. Morning low temperatures continuing to get cooler and cooler all the way until we get to Friday and Saturday, still starting out upper 50s around the 60-degree mark. So finally returning at least back to average, maybe slightly below average for those numbers that you do see the upper 50s. And I did mention the humidity will go down, and that's going to start between today and tomorrow. And we're going to keep the dew point temperatures in the 50s, what looks like for Wednesday and Thursday. Friday and Saturday, we could see a slight rebound in the humidity levels, but I really think it's going to be the tail end of Saturday into Sunday and Monday that will actually finally get some more moisture back into the forecast. But you will get used to seeing a lot of these points in this comfortable box over the foreseeable future. We typically don't have as much moisture in the forecast during the fall time months and virtually no moisture whatsoever once we transition into winter. But keep that in mind, the uptick in moisture into Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, because when we go into the long range models towards those dates, it is going to reflect a change in your forecast. So Friday still looks mostly clear. Maybe don't make it out to the fair on Thursday. Friday is looking good to go as well. Now we go into Saturday, where cloud cover, it does return back into the forecast. You start to see some scattered areas of some blue and some green try to creep up into central Georgia. So I have a small chance for the later half of Saturday of you may be seeing a couple of scattered light showers. As of right now, that's about all we're forecasting, but there is a lot more active weather down here in the south, especially down to the southwest in the northern Gulf. So we are going to see all of that moisture continue to push up towards the north. It does look to create some fairly widespread rain chances for the end of the weekend. That's the one day for the opening weekend of the fair that I do believe you're probably going to want to pack the rain jacket, maybe even avoid going to the fair, because this messy pattern could last into the beginning of next week. Monday still has some pretty decent rain chances, and we still hold on to those scattered areas that look like spilled paint, according to the GFS and the Euro, into Tuesday next week. So there are some changes on the horizon, but we'll continue to closely monitor those as we do continue to get closer. But right now, let's give you your latest update with the tropics. So as of 8 a.m. this morning, we now have Hurricane Imelda from Tropical Storm Imelda, which we've had for about the last 24 to 36 hours. So Hurricane Imelda is a Category 1 storm with 80-mile-per-hour winds. That pressure continues to go down a little bit more and a little bit more below that 1,000 millibar mark. It is forecasted to maintain that Category 1 strength, maybe just slightly intensify in terms of the wind speeds. But before it goes over Bermuda, or right there around when it goes into Bermuda, I think this icon right here is overlapping the island right there. Forecasted to briefly pop up into that Category 2 status, but after it moves past Bermuda into portions of the cooler Atlantic Ocean, where that water is a lot deeper over to the east and eventually a little bit cooler in those higher latitudes, it is expected to steadily weaken, but it does look like it still has a lifespan into the beginning of the weekend as it moves just to the east of Canada. But the important thing is it is moving to the northeast at 7 miles per hour. So that northeasterly direction continues to steer Hurricane Imelda away from the United States. So after today, I really think the impacts are not going to be there for the southeast United States. And then, of course, Bermuda is going to have to turn their attention to Hurricane Imelda. And Hurricane Humberto has drastically weakened since this time yesterday. This time yesterday, it was a Category 4 storm, an upper end Category 4 storm, which is good enough for major hurricane status. Well, Humberto has weakened all the way down into a Category 1. I believe Humberto and Imelda, as of this latest update, have the same sustained wind speeds of 80 miles per hour, pressure of 979 millibars, and right now it's moving to the north-northwest at 18 miles per hour, so it is moving more than double the speed of Imelda right now, but it is forecasted to start to turn up to the north throughout today and then eventually up into the north and the northeast as it does pass Bermuda, which is really hard to see. It's beneath all this cloud cover right here. I probably should have brought that label up in the scene, but you can see that it will continue to weaken. There's not too many timestamps. It does look like by early Thursday, Humberto is going to be non-existent. It's just going to be a disorganized cluster of moisture as it does continue to turn back up into the Atlantic Ocean and pass north of Bermuda, but sending its fair share of some tropical rain and I imagine some gusty wind conditions to the island of Bermuda right now. So that's where the only watch or warning tropical wise does remain, and we actually just got an upgrade from the hurricane watch that was in place as of this morning into a hurricane warning, which you see highlighted in that kind of hot pink and purple color. So it's going to go for the entire island of Bermuda that hurricane force conditions are going to be very likely within the next 36 hours. So a hurricane watch is just meaning hurricane force conditions are going to be possible within the next 48 hours. But once you start to get closer and closer to the time of impact, you can see that watch upgraded into a warning. And what I mean by hurricane force conditions, that's going to be winds of 74 plus miles per hour. I do believe we'll see winds in excess of that speed as Hurricane Imelda is forecasted to be at least really close or right around Category 2 status as it does interact with Bermuda. So as of the latest update, we have crossed 2 named storms off with Humberto and Imelda. That was our 8th and 9th named storms of the 2025 Atlantic hurricane season. What's going to be next is our 10th named storm, which is Jerry. And of these 9 named storms that we have had so far, 4 of them have now claimed hurricane status, and of those 4 hurricanes, we've actually had 3 of them that have popped up as major hurricanes. That was Humberto, that was Aaron, and that was Gabrielle. Hurricane Aaron got Category 5 status, Humberto got Category 5 status. I'd have to go back and do some research, but I'm pretty sure Gabrielle only got up to Category 4 status. But very thankfully, most of those major hurricanes have not had any implications in the United States besides some increased rip currents. A lot of these storms so far in the hurricane season have stayed well out at sea. So for your 7-day forecast, I added a lot of fun fair icons because we are 2 days away and we are so excited to not only participate and do lots of fair stories and even make our own way down there to the Georgia National Fairgrounds as we have our off days coming up, but also we are so excited to bring you some very nice weather for the beginning of the fair. You may remember the past couple of years and the beginning of the fair is typically, historically, pretty hot. We're holding on to that last little bit of summertime heat. Hopefully we got that out of the way last week, and we're going to continue to have pleasant, even slightly fall-like weather for the beginning of the fair Thursday, Friday, and most of Saturday. I do have that 10% chance that we're reintroducing in terms of some rain. That's mainly just for the later hours on Saturday. You don't want to run into that rain. Your better bet is going to be to go to the fair in the first half of the day. And then as we transition into the end of the weekend and the beginning of the work week next week, we'll still continue to see some rain chances. Right now scattered at about 30 to 20%. I do think the rain chances go down as we go into the beginning of next week as opposed to Sunday, but your afternoon high temperatures are still going to be below average each and every day. Right now your average high temperature sits around 84 degrees, and 83 is the warmest day we have on your 7-day forecast, one of which will be tomorrow and the other of which looks to be on Monday as we roll into the beginning of next week. So looking ahead, first day of October, that will be tomorrow, start of the fair one day after, and then past that, we are about a month away from Halloween, and then just after that, we have Election Day the following Tuesday. A lot of exciting things to look forward to, but we're getting into that fall season, getting a bit of a fall feel in the air. We're going to have some fun graphics that we can throw together for you for all of those events. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you here tomorrow at 11 a.m. We have moved this now to 11 a.m. to allow for the updates with the tropics. So catch me here tomorrow on 13 WMAZ Plus at 11 a.m.